Yes.
So after that, sir, you have written this motion equation, sir. There,
Yes.
how this motion equation has come? This is only just.
So I wrote down the algorithm, right? It's part of the class that I taught. So you define a new Lagrangian L dash, which is equal to L plus the Lagrange multiplier times the constraint equation. In this case, y plus phi r equal to 0 was the constraint equation. So y plus phi r becomes the constraint function. Okay. So you just write that. Now treat lambda as another generalized coordinate and then take this L prime through the Euler-Lagrange equations, and that will give you the equations which will help you to determine the constraint forces. Okay. So I don't see any problem with the mathematics there. If you point out any specific problem there, I can answer that. But the steps in the mathematics was very clearly, explained and written down in my notes. So you just have to follow that machinery for you to obtain the constraint forces by using Lagrange multipliers. So if you have any specific question, you can ask me, because I don't understand what is confusing about that. Algorithm was written down in the class, right?
Okay, sir. Okay. No, sir. Then after that, you have computed lambda equal to mg by 3. All these things are, sir, little bit not able to get it.
Yeah, you try to solve that problem yourself, Dinesh. And
Okay.
if you are having difficulty, see, the best way to understand something is to do it yourself. Okay, this is a PG level course, and I cannot solve every step of algebra in the class, and I should not be doing that. Okay, so you try to obtain those expressions yourself, and if you have difficulties, you come back to me. I have skipped some steps which I consider to be obvious and straightforward.
Okay.
Okay, but maybe to some students it might not appear as obvious as I think it might be. In which case, I request the students to come and ask me how you got that particular step, and I will describe that to you. Okay, so you first try. You first try to
Okay.
open. So this also sort of ties into one of the comments that request that you guys had. Can you please mute your mic? Yeah. So last class you wanted me to solve this multi-body dynamics problem in the homework. So using the Newton-Euler formalism, and my answer was the same. The algorithm is given in the notes, and this is a PG level course. Okay, I feel that if I have to apply that algorithm carefully, and I've also already applied the algorithms to many examples. I've taken many examples in class and already demonstrated how they can be applied. So all I'm asking you to do now is to apply the same algorithm to a slightly new system. And as a PG level course, I feel that you guys should rise up to that challenge and not expect every step and every problem to look very similar to what would have been done in the class, and every step to be explained in great detail. I expect you guys to have some initiative. Okay, I'm not saying that I will not answer questions. If you have, you try, and if you fail or you get stuck somewhere, you're welcome to get back to me and ask how to proceed further. But there are some small little blanks that are left along the way, which, as I said, you guys have initiative, you guys have drive. That's why you are all here, in the IISc. I believe that you should continue to show that initiative and try to fill in those gaps. If you have difficulties, come and talk to me. Okay, if you couldn't understand how I got mg by 3, okay, by you try it yourself and you get stuck somewhere, please talk to me. I'll help you out. But if you ask me to explain from start, it simply boils down to me doing a lot of very straightforward algebra, which I think even you guys are more than capable of doing. So I urge you to please try to do that algebra yourself before coming back to me. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, sir, in 3D problems, na, sir.
Hmm.
Uh, Actually, sir, I seen in the book they are forming one table actually, sir, because of their 90 degrees. Actually, there are four parameters. Something is there. In 2D problems, sir, we can take one coordinate system and assigning, as you have discussed in the class now, it's very straightforward. But sir, when we are coming 3D now, I see in the books that they are forming one table and assigning the coordinates. It's totally different, sir. Actually, that is the only confusing actually.
It's a more systematic way of doing things. I think the table that you are referring to are what are known as dynamic Hartenberg parameters.
Yes, yeah,
Those
I
would
see
be,
the book.
yeah, those would be, if you take Professor Goshal's course next semester, I'm sure he will cover those for you.
Uh,
That's just a more
yes,
systematic way of bookkeeping and coming up with correct homogeneous transformation matrices. But the material that I talk now is adequate for you to solve the problems that are given in the homeworks. It's not necessary, although it will streamline those parameters, etc., will streamline the process of solving it. Uh, I feel that even with the machinery that you have been taught so far, it is possible to solve some of these 3D problems.
okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's just a systematic way of doing it. That's all that the table helps you to do. Okay. So, are there any other questions? Okay. So, if there are no further questions, let us get started with today's lecture. So, I have started to correct your answer sheets, your midterm answer sheets, and I am hoping that maybe tomorrow sometime I will be able to return them to you. So, what I would like to do ideally is to annotate your PDFs and then return them to you, just as if I would have corrected a physical answer sheet if we actually had physically met in a classroom. So that might take some time. So that's one source of uncertainty for me. Otherwise, I'm hoping that by tomorrow I will be able to return your answer scripts. Okay. So with that, share the screen. Okay. So can you guys see my sheet of paper? Okay. Thank you. So the topic of today's lecture is control of dynamic systems. So we are getting started with control, with today's lecture. Okay. So if you look at the effort that we have put over the last few months, starting from October, it has, at one level, you can say our goal was to learn how to write down the equations of motion for multi-body systems, starting with single rigid bodies and then subsequently multi-rigid bodies and subsequently other components connected to these multi-rigid bodies. Okay. Now, so the equation we ultimately obtained was, as I said, something of this kind, right? MQ q double dot plus C of q comma q dot times q dot plus G of q is equal to tau, something of that kind. Okay. Now, you might ask, why did we do this? Okay. Well, of course, I can always justify that by saying that rigid body dynamics is important and so on and so forth, and sort of brush away that question. But if you also look at the names of people whom we have brought up during the discussion of this equation, while arriving at this equation, very frequently Euler's name came up, right? And Newton had to be there because mechanics started with Newton almost, okay? And you had Lagrange, okay? And then I brought in the name of Chandler. If you look at what profession, I mean, if you categorize them on the basis of profession, of course, professions were not as well defined in their times as they are today, but you would maybe, categorize Newton as a natural philosopher. And these days, physicists consider him, a physicist. Okay, most scientists consider him a physicist. Euler was a polymath, but who contributed to both physics and mathematics, but he's viewed primarily as a mathematician. Okay, and Lagrange, much more of a hardcore mathematician probably than Euler. Okay, then Chandler, he was an astronomer. So here we are in a course devoted to mechanical engineering, where we have brought up names very frequently of people who have never been associated with mechanical engineering. Maybe, we would thank Newton because we owe our existence to Newton's laws, but most others who are not formal mechanical engineers. Okay, so you might therefore very well ask, see, clearly if I look at the people who have worked on the problems that you have been discussing in the class so far, they have all been physicists or mathematicians. There are no engineers in this list. Okay, so what goal or what purpose does the study of these kinds of systems serve to the engineer? Okay, so that is the starting point and the basis for the rest of this course. Okay, to the physicist is interested in the natural world around him or her. He or she is happy by just explaining the natural world. So a pendulum moves in a certain way. I think a physicist would be happy to explain why it moves in a certain way. So just obtain the equations of motion and move on. Okay, so that is the goal of the physicist. So just analyze and understand the equations, understand the mechanics of systems. That's what a physicist would be interested in. So therefore, you have a lot of physicists featuring in our discussions. The mathematician, often what happens is mathematics is the most straightforward language for us to understand the natural world. So systems, natural physical systems, therefore end up obeying differential equations, okay, which are mathematical entities, and you have vectors and matrices and so many other mathematical tools which are so useful when we are studying the natural world. Okay, so you can understand how mathematicians get involved in this process. They come up with these tools which may not have been brought about, which may not have been conceived keeping in mind the physical problem that they want to solve, but often those tools that they develop end up solving a lot of physical problems because mathematics seems to be the language of Mother Nature. Okay, so that's what study of multi-body dynamics offers to the mathematician. Study of multi-body dynamics offers something else to the physicist, as I just now told you. Okay, it helps the physicist understand the natural world. Okay, what does it offer to the engineer? Why should we engineers, all of us here are engineers, why should we engineers be studying the dynamics of multi-body systems? If you think about it, there's one very important reason that we need to study, and that distinguishes us both from mathematicians and physicists. While physicists just want to understand the natural world, the engineers, on the other hand, want to modify it, okay, want to control it in some particular way. So the reason we find the study of dynamics interesting, we find the study of dynamics relevant, is because we want to modify this physical system or design a physical system that does our bidding. So at the heart of our mandate as engineers is this goal of control of physical systems. Okay, why do you study mechanics? A physicist would be interested in stress-strain relationships and how objects deform, but an engineer's job doesn't stop with that. So why do we study strength of materials? So you want to be able to design better beams, stronger columns, and understand the the way in which it can fail so that your structures are built better, and so on and so forth. So always the practical utility of this knowledge and our ability to use a certain body of knowledge to control a physical system that we are interested in is always at the background of every initiative that the engineer takes. Okay, so far we have not emphasized that. So that's why you only have the names of mathematicians and physicists appearing in a course that is taught in a mechanical engineering department. We have modeled our system. We have modeled our multi-body system. And this modeling exercise was something that was of common interest to physicists, to mathematicians, as well as to engineers. But unlike physicists who would simply move away from this point forward, having obtained this, that's it. He may the physicist may at best hand over this problem to the mathematician so that they understand how this differential equation can be solved, how the states Q evolve as function of time, etc., etc. But beyond that, there isn't too much more that the physicist would find interesting in this problem. Whereas the engineer on the other hand, wants to get the system to do his bidding. In other words, I want the states, I want my generalized coordinates to change in a certain way. Okay, and how do I get them to change in a certain way? If I have a 2R manipulator, I want the angles to change in a certain way so that the end effector moves along a certain trajectory with a certain velocity and acceleration. These are the kinds of questions that bug us. And we too find it relevant to come up with the dynamics for obtaining that desired motion. But the starting point for obtaining the desired motion is to join hands with engineers, join hands with physicists and mathematicians, and understand the dynamics of the system first, the model of the system first. Okay, so from this point forward, we will wear our engineer's hat a lot more proudly than we have been doing so far, and see how we can control dynamic systems, or in other words, systems whose equations appear like the one that I have shown here. Okay. So, and we have been moving in the direction gradually all along. Okay, we first took the help of physicists to come to this point. Then we took the help of mathematicians to solve this equation. Okay, to understand how the system responds to certain inputs. Okay, now we employ both these bits of information, the physics as well as the mathematics, to go one step beyond what either a physicist or a mathematician would do. Namely, try to control the system or try to change it to do what I want it to do. Okay, that's what we as engineers are here for, and that's how the controls half of this course merges seamlessly with the dynamics half of the course. Okay, so let us briefly recap what we discussed in the previous lecture. So we talked about linearization of the state equation. Okay, about an equilibrium point. So the state equation of the kind x dot is equal to f of x comma u. Okay, we linearized it about an equilibrium point. Okay, then we did this because it was only in the vicinity of the equilibrium point could we even dream of coming up with a closed form solution to this differential equation. Okay, then we even in the vicinity of the equilibrium point, the way forward was not very clear. So we first solved the homogeneous state equation, or in other words, the state equation for the autonomous system where u was set equal to 0. So x dot is equal to f of x comma 0. That was the system that we solved, but again in the vicinity of the equilibrium point. So in that case, I replaced x with x naught plus small x, and I saw that the dynamics would be linear in its nature. So it would be of the kind ax plus bu, and for the homogeneous system, u will be equal to 0. So x dot is equal to ax given some initial condition x naught. This was a solution. This was a problem that we first solved. Okay. Subsequently, we found that the solution was of the kind e to the power at x naught, and then I understood what e to the power at meant, because it's an abstract notion. If you try to extrapolate from our very simplistic understanding of e to the power something, okay, e to the power 2, e to the power 3 are easily imaginable quantities, but e to the power a matrix is is something that we cannot imagine. So instead of expecting us to imagine this, we just define it to be simply this particular power series, I plus a t plus a square t square by 2 factorial, etc., etc. Okay, then we used this as inspiration to solve the non-homogeneous problem, or the one where you have forcing, and we saw that the solution would look like x of t is equal to x naught, e to the power at x naught plus integral 0 to t e to the power at minus tau b times u of tau d tau. Okay, then we return to this slightly perplexing quantity e to the power at to breathe more life into it, and we discovered along the way that we can exploit the the process that we use for diagonalizing a matrix to understand e to the power at much better. So in particular, we saw that if a could be diagonalized, or in other words, it had n distinct eigenvalues, then you could write A as u lambda u inverse, where lambda was a diagonal matrix. And then using this, we saw that e to the power at could be written as u e to the power lambda t u inverse. Okay, but lambda t had a very definite physical meaning, something that we could all relate to. E to the power lambda t was simply all the elements along the diagonal, e to the power lambda 1t, e to the exponentiated. So e to the power lambda 2t, etc., e to the power lambda nt. Okay, then we saw that our solution, even to the homogeneous problem, involved e to the power at, of course. And therefore, if I release my system from a certain initial condition x0, then the way the states evolve as function of time are dependent on this term e to the power at, and this we saw in turn is dependent on the magnitudes of these terms, lambda 1, lambda 2, all the way to lambda n. In particular, if the real part of any of the lambdas was, if all of the lambdas was less than 0, so where I goes from 1 to n, okay, then every single term here decays as function of time. Okay, so if I release my system from a certain initial state x0, if I wait long enough, the system would have come back to the equilibrium point. Okay, it would have come back to 0. Okay, so this is called as a stable system. Then if a few of these eigenvalues, so if real part of lambda I was equal to 0, not all of them need be equal to 0, but even if a few of them are equal to 0, then such a system was called as an marginally stable system. And if any one of these real, let me simply put real part of lambda k equal to 0 for some k. Okay, if real part of lambda k was greater than 0 for some particular k, maybe more than 1k particular value of k, then you have e to the power some positive quantity times t in this matrix. And when I write out my solution as x e to the power at times x0, I will have increasing exponentials as part of one or more of my responses x of t. And that means that the system states blow up as function of time, or they move away from the equilibrium point. Okay, so such a system is quite naturally called as an unstable system. Okay, so you see therefore that these roots of the characteristic equation of the matrix A are very important terms. Okay, in fact, we will be focusing on them with laser-like focus for the rest of the semester. These are also called as the poles of the system for reasons that we will get to, not right now, but later on. Okay, lambda I are also called the poles of the system. Okay, they have fundamental impact on the way the system responds. If I know lambdas, I don't need to actually write out the solution. I know whether the system is stable or marginally stable or unstable, and what will happen if I leave it with a certain initial condition. Okay, why is this concern of stability so important? We will see very soon. Okay, but before we do that, I just did all of this in the previous class without taking up a practical example. So what I shall do in today's lecture, before we start on discussions in relation to control of dynamic systems, is we shall take an example to show how we can solve these equations. Okay, how do we, if I have a certain initial condition x0 for a certain concrete physical system such as a pendulum, how do we obtain x of t, at least in the homogeneous case, at least when there is no forcing. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so let us take the example of a pendulum. So we notice that the pendulum in general obeys a nonlinear differential equation. g by L sin theta is equal to tau. Okay, but we can linearize it, and we initially we can linearize it about its several equilibria. There are multiple equilibrium points for this. So the equilibrium points x naught will be of the kind n pi comma 0. Okay, where n can assume values of 0 plus or minus 1, etc., etc. Okay, now if we linearize this equation about n equal to 0 or 2 pi or 2 or 4 or whatever, the even numbered indices, okay, then we saw that we could write x dot is equal to ax plus bu, where a was of the kind 0, 1 minus g by L 0, okay, and b was 0, 1. Okay, we could write it this way, but for the homogeneous case, we set u equal to 0, so the exact this b times u becomes irrelevant. We are just trying to solve this particular equation, x dot is equal to ax, certain initial state x naught. So what do you mean by this initial state? So I have the pendulum. This is its. If it is pointed down, then n is equal to 0 or 2 pi or whatever, and if I displace it slightly from its equilibrium point, give a small displacement theta, and release it from that, I can even give a small kick to it. It can even have a small initial velocity. That's also perfectly fine, as long as the resulting oscillation is of small amplitude, or the changes in theta are quite small, such that sin theta is approximately equal to theta is valid. Then this is what I mean by the system obeying this particular differential equation with this particular initial condition. Okay, so this is a picture that you can imagine when we are talking about this differential equation and this initial condition. Initial condition could be some initial angle theta naught by which I have displaced the pendulum bob away from its equilibrium, or some initial velocity that I might have provided to the pendulum bob, or a combination of the two. Okay, so how do we solve this differential equation? First, we have to obtain. We know that x of t is equal to e to the power at x naught. That's already given to us. Okay. Now let us assume in this particular case that we have displaced it by a certain amount, certain angle theta naught, and the initial velocity is 0. Okay. Let us try to solve this equation. Okay. Let us try to obtain the expression for x of t. So the first step is I can write e to the power at as u e to the power lambda t u inverse. Okay, where lambda is the the diagonal matrix comprising the eigenvalues of my matrix A. Okay, so what are the eigenvalues of my matrix A? I have to solve the corresponding equation, determinant of lambda I minus A is equal to 0 to obtain the values of lambda 1 and lambda 2. Okay, so let us do that. Lambda I is lambda is a diagonal matrix with lambda along the diagonal minus the A matrix 0, 1 minus G by L 0. Okay, that is lambda I minus A, and that's equal to lambda minus 1 minus plus G by L, and this is also lambda. So determinant of therefore lambda I minus A will therefore be equal to lambda square plus plus G by L is equal to 0. Okay, determinant of lambda I minus A equal to 0 implies this particular thing, and this has two roots. Lambda 1 comma 2 is equal to plus or minus I root of G by L, right? Because lambda square will be equal to minus G by L, and under root of that will give me this particular value. So lambda 1 is maybe I root of G by L, and lambda 2 is minus I root of G by L. Okay, so this is the first step. We have obtained the lambda matrix, and e to the power lambda t, therefore e to the power lambda t will be equal to e to the power I root of G by L times t. So it will be a diagonal matrix again, and e to the power minus I root of g by L times t. Okay. Next, we have to make that matrix whose columns are the eigenvectors of the matrix A. So for that, we have to have that AU should be equal to lambda U. That should happen, right? For U to be an eigenvector. So what is A? It is minus g by L 0 times U1 U2 is equal to lambda 1. The first lambda is I root of g by L times U1 U2. And what does this indicate? This indicates that if I look at just the first multiplication, U2 is equal to I root of g by L U1. Okay. The second equation is redundant. Minus g by L U1 is equal to I root of g by L U2. This is redundant because it just follows from the first one. Okay. So I only need this first equation. So my eigenvector, where if I choose U1 to be equal to 1, then my eigenvector will be it will be 1 I root of g by L. Okay, so this is one eigenvector. Similarly, if I solve the eigenvalue problem, if I try to determine the eigenvector associated with the other eigenvalue, namely minus I root of g by L, I will get the other eigenvector to be 1 and minus I root of g by L. Okay, so my U matrix is a juxtaposition of these two column vectors. So it's 1 I root of g by L and 1 minus I root of g by L. Okay, so now my solution x of t will be equal to U e to the power lambda t U inverse times x naught. Okay, so I can just plug in the values of the expressions for U e to the power lambda t, and I can also compute U inverse in terms of all these other quantities without too much trouble. And then we have assumed that x naught, that initial the vector, the state initial state will be that the angular part will be theta naught and the initial velocity will be 0. So x naught, as we discussed, therefore was of the kind theta naught 0. So if I plug everything in and shake them very well, I get the expression for x of t, the state at some point in time t, and I can show, if I do the math carefully, that it will be of the kind minus theta naught square root of g by L sine of root of g by L t. Okay, and sorry, that's the velocity part. X of t will be equal to theta naught cos of root of g by L t. Okay, and minus theta naught root of g by L sine of root of g by L t. So I just need to plug in all of this and solve it to get this expression. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Now I can repeat this also at the other equilibrium point. I shall not do that. When the pendulum is pointed up, when it is in its inverted configuration, in which case the A matrix for the inverted pendulum will be 0, 1 plus g by L and 0. Okay, and if I do determinant of lambda I minus A equal to 0, I get lambda square equal to g by L, or in other words, lambda equal to plus minus root of g by L. It is always instructive to locate these lambdas in the complex plane, because lambdas are in general complex numbers. So in this particular case, if this is real part of lambda and this imaginary part of lambda, you have one lambda here, which is at plus square root of g by L, and another lambda on the other side, so situated symmetrically on the real axis at minus square root of g by L. In contrast, if I go back to that first problem that we solved, here you will have, if I were to draw it, squeeze in this graph here somewhere. So the real part of lambda, imaginary. Here, lambda 1 and lambda 2 both have 0 real parts. So you have both of them lying on the imaginary axis. One of them being I root of g by L, the other being minus I root of g by L. Okay, this locates the lambdas and it gives me information about the nature of the system here. So the fact that the real part of lambda here is 0 and both the lambdas are imaginary tells me that this system is marginally stable. And I know from physical experience that if a pendulum is displaced from its equilibrium and released, in the absence of any dissipation, it will keep swinging back and forth. The amplitude will either increase with time nor will it decrease with time. Okay, that's why it's a marginally stable system. Whereas if I have an inverted pendulum, okay, even a small perturbation from its equilibrium point will get the pendulum to completely flip over. So it will move away from the equilibrium point, and that happens because one way of understanding that is that one of the roots of the characteristic equation is positive. Okay, one of the roots lies on the right half of the complex plane, and you have an increasing exponential response associated with that, and that response is what takes the state of the pendulum away from its equilibrium point. Okay, so why are these characteristics? Why is the stability or the instability of a physical system of great concern to us as control engineers? Because as I said, starting from this lecture, we will be wearing this hat of a control engineer and trying to modify the physical system rather than just study its response to various inputs. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so why is the stability or the lack thereof of such central concern to us engineers? To answer this, let us first clarify what we want to do as control engineers. We want the systems to do our bidding, right? So let me put that in slightly more concrete terms by taking a particular example. Okay, so let us say we have our 2R manipulator. Okay, so we have a 2R manipulator here and an end effector somewhere at the end, and let us say we define θ2 and θ1 as our generalized coordinates. Then suppose we were to use this 2R manipulator as a robot. Okay, you might want this robot to pick and place stuff from one point in space to another. Of course, because it's a planar manipulator, it can do it only in this one particular plane, and it has 2 degrees of freedom. So I can independently move the the end effector along the x and y axes. Okay, so I might want an object to be picked from this point and moved to that point. Okay, not only do I want it to be moved in this particular way, I also want it to be I also want it to follow a certain trajectory while going from this point to that point. X0, Y0 is X1, Y1. Okay, so someone has hello, yeah. So there was some disturbance in the middle. And not only do I want it to follow a certain trajectory, but the x coordinate should change as function of time in a certain manner. And the y coordinate should also change as function of time in a certain manner while going from y0 to y1. Okay, so this is y0 and that is y1. So I want it to accelerate in the beginning maybe and move with constant velocity for some time and then decelerate by the time it reaches y1 and come to rest there. And a similar a waveform might be demanded of me along the x-axis as well. Okay, so this is the wish list of the engineer. The engineer wants this 2R manipulator to do his or her bidding, and that in concrete terms means exactly this. So not only should it move along a certain trajectory, but x and y should change as function of time in a certain specific manner. And I have to, therefore, the role of the engineer is to decide how to actuate these joints here, θ1 and θ2, so that the end effector moves in this particular manner. Okay, so this this whole process of planning how I want my end effector to move is what is known as path planning. Okay. Now what is done, and this is very much within the ambit of engineering, mechanical engineering, not so much. It has nothing to do with either physics or anything else. Now what has to be done first is you have to solve this inverse kinematics problem. Okay, if I have if I have to move in this particular manner with these particular ways in which the x and y coordinates change as function of time, okay, I need to change my theta1 as function of time in a particular manner and theta2 as function of time in a particular manner. Okay, and that the manner in which theta1 and theta2 have to be changed as function of time will emerge from our inverse kinematic analysis of this particular mechanism. Okay, so if I know, if my boss has told me how I want this to move from point A to point B, then as an engineer, I need to pay attention to how the angles theta1 and theta2 have to be changed as function of time. So let me call that theta1d and theta2d. Okay, well, the d here represents desired. Okay, desired way in which we want these to change. Okay, so if we make a state vector out of these generalized coordinates, we know that the x1 of the state vector will be just these two things, theta1d, theta2d. Okay, and x2 will be x1 dot. So theta1d dot, theta2d dot. Okay, if I know how I want my x and y to change as function of time, then I will know how theta and theta1 and theta2 should also change as function of time, and therefore these are also known. Okay, so in trying to go from here to there, I have to make sure that my states follow, the states assume these particular values, theta1d, theta2d, theta dot 1d, theta dot 2d. Initially they will not have these particular values. So my goal as a control engineer is to figure out what torque I need to provide to get my states to follow these particular values as function of time. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so I hope through this concrete example I have made clear what we want as control engineers. Okay, we want this trajectory to be tracked, and it should be completed according to a certain in a certain time frame, and the velocity should be, x and y velocity should be certain specified functions of time. Okay, how do we go about doing this? When we attempt to do this, there's a very simple
Hello,
way. Yes, hello. Yes.
sir. This is Maleshwara.
Okay, tell me.
Sir, in previous case, in pendulum case, we got
Yes.
one of the eigenvalue as negative.
Correct.
That means we have a chance to that pendulum get again its original position.
Well, that's a good question. So what if you have two terms, right? E to the power minus root of g by lt. The general expression for x will be some for x1 to be like some c1 times this plus c2 times e to the power plus root g by lt. Okay, and x2 will also be the same kind of expression. Now you might say, well, if I set c2 to be equal to 0, then I will only have a decaying exponential. And then can I classify my system as a stable system? That's the kind of question you are having, is it not? So
Yes,
the same thing would be true with x2 also. Exactly. Now, unfortunately, this boils down to a practical problem. How can you make in practice C2 exactly equal to 0? Yeah, a mathematician will happily set this coefficient equal to 0. Okay, but an engineer or a physicist has to confront the fact that it is not possible for me to release my system from some exact particular state. So that exact particular state should be exact to the very last decimal place. Okay, even if there is a small deviation in that initial condition which gives me C2 equal to 0, then C2 there will be a very small C2. Okay, so what I'm saying here is, if I choose my initial condition so carefully then it is possible for this coefficient C2 to become equal to 0 and only for this particular coefficient to remain, right? But how do I do that in practice? I mean, even a small change in the initial condition from that particular special condition will get the C2 to be non-zero. Okay, and it may be a very small number because that perturbation, that deviation from that special initial condition might be a small one, but it's non-zero. That's what is important. And because this is non-zero and it's a small quantity, and this small quantity multiplies something that's increasing with time, there will be some time at which this product will become significant. And after that point of time, this state x1 will start to move farther and farther away from the equilibrium point. Okay, so even though by a certain very judicious choice of initial conditions, I can get only the first term to exist in the equation. A mathematician can do that. A physicist or an engineer cannot guarantee that in the physical system and the initial condition that they have picked. Okay, so inevitably one has to confront the fact that any solution that we have will include this kind of a term. It cannot be eliminated and it cannot be removed off the table. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Sir,
okay.
So Dinesh, sir,
Yes.
then C1 has to be 0, na, sir?
Not necessarily. It depends on the kind of initial condition that you pick. Okay, we simply derived it for this particular case. Okay, let us say we have offset this by a certain position theta naught. Okay, in this particular case, what you will notice is that you will probably have only this term. C1 will be non-zero. Sorry, C1 will be 0, and you have only this term. Let us say, on the other hand, I have. So there is a theta dot also at time t equal to 0. Then it is possible for both this component and that component to exist together. Okay, so that's why it might initially come this way and then go back in another direction, or go around in the other direction. So all those kinds of motion are captured by the fact that C1 and C2 in general are not both equal to 0. Okay, so depending on the initial condition, you will have a certain value for C1 and C2.
So then it will be oscillation, na?
Why will it be oscillation?
If C1, C2 both is exist, then
where do you see the oscillatory term here? You have only exponentials here. You have a decreasing exponential and increasing exponential. Whereas in the previous case, you had cos omega t, sin omega t. So those contributed to oscillations. Here, there is none of these terms change as function of time. Sorry, oscillate as function of time.
okay, okay, sir.
Okay. So let us come back to this a problem that we were discussing of controlling a 2R manipulator to go from point A to point B. And now let us understand how the stability or the instability of this 2R manipulator can throw spanner in our works. Okay. So I shall first do it at a slightly abstract level, and then I shall take a concrete example of a pendulum, because a 2R manipulator is quite sophisticated. Its equations are quite lengthy and so on. So the state vector will be a 4x1 vector for a 2R manipulator. So it's harder to flow through the algebra for that case. So I just gave this example to point out what we wish to do as engineers and how the stability or the instability of a system affects our ability to do this. Okay, so let us see how it is possible to accomplish this particular objective of getting the trajectory to be whatever we want it to be. Okay, so as we saw when we wrote down the the state equation for our dynamic system, we could write it down as x1 dot equal to x2. Here x1 is the vector of joint variables, the generalized coordinates of our problem, and x2 will be the joint velocities, right? So then x2 dot was some mass matrix times something else and so on and so forth. Mass matrix inverse times something, and so some torque minus the Coriolis component and the gravity component and such other things. Okay. In general, when we linearize it about some equilibrium point, we can write it this way: small x1 dot is equal to small x2, and small x2 dot will be equal to some a21 x1 plus a22 x2. Okay, what exactly they are, would be evident from the exact structure of your mass matrix and your Coriolis terms and so on and so forth. Okay, plus there will be a B21 B21 U. Some joint torque will also act. Okay, this will be the kind of equation that a dynamic system would obey. And of course, I put x1 and x2 together so that I get a first order differential equation, and that would be of the kind x2 and a21 x1 plus a22 x2 plus b21 u. Okay, and I write it in the form of a matrix. So this is 0 I a21 a22 x1 x2 plus 0 b21 u. Okay, this is how the equation of a general dynamic system would appear when it is represented in the state space form. Okay, now I want x1, the vector of my generalized coordinates, to be some x1 desired. Okay, and I want x2, the vector of my generalized velocities, to be some other x2 desired. Okay, so I gave the example of the 2R manipulator and showed what x1 desired and x2 desired physically mean. Okay, so I want this to happen. So what I want to do then as a control engineer is find out what input u I have to apply in order for my states x1 and x2 to assume values x1d and x2d. Is that clear? Are there any questions about this? This is my goal as a control engineer. Okay, I want my state x1 to be equal to x1d, x2 to be equal to x2d. If I do that, in other words, if I apply such joint torques that this happens, then my manipulator will move in the manner that that my path planning engineer has asked it to move. Okay, how do I do that? So suppose by good fortune already x1 and x2 were equal to x1d and x2d, then what equation do they satisfy? Let us just see that. Suppose by way of good fortune it already happens, then you would have that x1 d dot will be equal to x2d, of course, because one is a position, the other is a velocity. The other one equation will be that x2d dot will be equal to a11 x1d plus a12 x2d plus b12 u desired, the desired input that gives the states x1d and x2d as functions of time. Okay. So this tells me what ud I need to apply. Okay, if I wish for my states to and x2d. This is a first case. This is not going to be the end of our attempt. It turns out that this will only work partially, but not always. But as a first attempt to get our states x1 and x2 to become x1d and x2d, I'm sorry, I'm abusing. These are all small x's. Okay, these are deviations from the equilibrium point. Okay.
Sir, A21, A22 and B21, right? In the second equation.
A21, correct. Thank you. A22, B21. Thank you. It's very hard to keep track of what I'm writing and what I'm speaking at the same time. Okay, so this tells me that as a first guess, the kind of input I have to apply should satisfy B21 UD, okay, is equal to x2d dot minus a21 x1d minus a22 x2d. If I apply this input, hopefully my states will move along these particular, will assume values x1d and x2d. This is my hope. Okay, I don't know how to get started with the control problem, but I know that if my states are already on x1d, assume values x1d and x2d, this is the relation between the states, the rates of change and the input. So therefore, I work backwards and hope that if I apply this input, I will end up getting my states to converge to x1d and x2d. Okay, any questions about this logic? Okay, so let us say we did that. Okay, we applied this kind of input. So UD as B21 inverse of this thing. Okay, we do that. Then let me plug that back. If I apply that input, I would have that x1 dot is equal to x2, and then x2 dot will be equal to A21 x1 plus A22 x2 plus B21 u, and B21 u is given by this particular expression here, and it is given, that's given to be x2d dot minus A21 x1d minus A22 x2d. Okay, so I shall send x2d to the right hand side. I'll get x2 dot minus x2d dot to be equal to A21. You see here I have x1 minus x1d, okay, plus A22 x2 minus x2d. Okay, this is what I get, right? And the first equation also I can modify as x1 dot minus x1d dot is equal to x2 minus x2d, because x1d dot by definition is equal to x2d. Now I combine these two together, I get x1 dot minus x1d dot, x2 dot minus x2d dot is equal to 0, I, A21, A22. In other words, the same matrix A times x1 minus x1d, x2 minus x2d. Okay. Now what is this here? Do you agree with me that this vector x1 minus x1d as one set of columns and x2 minus x2d as another column beneath that is nothing but the error in tracking my desired x1 and x2 as functions of time? Do you agree with me that this is just the error E of t? Any questions about this? So this error vector has in it two components. One is error in positioning, the other is error in velocity. Okay, so the two put together give me the error in the state vector E of t. Any questions about this? Okay, so what is the error dynamics then? On the right hand side, I have the rate of change of that error, E dot. And we see here that the rate of change of the error is given by E dot is equal to A times E. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay. So let us say the initial states. I mean, yes, Abhishek Panchal has a question.
Sir, our desired locations are fixed. So what is x1 d dot and x2 d dot? Means it should be 0.
No. If you look at the trajectory, the initial and final positions are fixed. But as I go from the initial position to the final position, the states x, the coordinates x and y of the end effector have to change, and corresponding to that, the generalized coordinates θ1 and θ2 have to change as function of time, right? So the manner in which θ1 and θ2 have to change as function of time in order to go from the first position of the 2R manipulator to its final position is what x1d of t is and x2d of t is. Okay. So x1 is a vector of generalized coordinates, x2 is a vector of generalized velocities. Okay. So the way the velocity has to change as function of time to go from point A to point B, and the way the position has to change as function of time to go from point A to point B is what x1d and x2d capture. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So as I said, as a control engineer, I want my states, my joint variables, joint angles, and joint velocities to change as predefined functions of time. And what I discover is that if I apply that specific form of input, and I have guessed that particular form here, right? B21 times UD is equal to this particular thing. Okay, x2d dot minus whatever. This is very commonsensical, because if the states were already on it, then this is the equation that connects the input torque that I need to apply to the joint variables and their rates of change. Okay, it's not yet on it, but I'm hoping that I just want to apply this and see what happens. Okay, and what happens is that the error between the actual states and the desired states follow this particular dynamic equation or follow this particular differential equation. This is called error dynamics. Okay, and if there's some initial error, so my initial states will not exactly be x1d and x2d. Okay, initial velocity will not be exactly what I want it to be. Initial position may also be offset from whatever I would like it to be. So initial error will be, let us say, E naught. Then how will the error evolve as function of time? E of t will be equal to exponential of at times E naught. That's the solution to this autonomous systems dynamics, right? Dynamic equation. So now you begin to appreciate why the stability or the lack thereof of my original 2R manipulator's linearized dynamics about its equilibrium point is so important. Okay, what I will have therefore is that error will, as I said, contain terms like C1 e to the power lambda 1t plus C2 e to the power lambda 2t and so on and so forth. Okay, maybe let me just focus on the error in just one of the joint variables, E1 of t or some such thing. Okay, if any one of those lambdas is its real part is greater than 0, what will happen to this error E1? Do you agree with me? It will blow up as function of time. So my attempt to get this system to track that particular trajectory will suffer failure if my system is unstable. Okay. On the other hand, if my original system was already stable, okay, if all the eigenvalues of A had their real parts on the left half of the complex plane, as it is called, or in other words, had the real parts being negative, then all of these terms e to the power lambda 1t, lambda 2t, etc. will be decaying exponentials. And what will happen to the error as time progresses? The error will progressively become 0. Okay, it will become smaller and smaller as function of time until it will be of negligible concern to us engineers. So for all practical purposes, E will become equal to 0. E of t will become 0 in the limit t tends to infinity. Of course, t tends to infinity is a mathematician's way of writing it, but this becomes 0 within a few time constants, within a few multiples of the the largest time constant. Okay. So you see, therefore, that the idea that we had of applying that particular input here, given by this expression here, will work out fantastically if my system is stable, but will not work out, will suffer failure if the system is unstable. Okay, so the stability or the lack thereof of the system has a big impact on whether I'll be able to get my system states on the desired values, get to converge to the desired values or not. Okay, so suppose the system is stable, then by all means I can apply this strategy for changing the states of my system, and this kind of control is called open loop control. Okay, why is it called open loop control will become apparent in a few minutes time. It turns out that this same strategy can be applied even for the original nonlinear differential equation that the 2R manipulator obeys, but with some modifications. And this strategy is called computed torque technique of controlling the 2R manipulator. We'll get to that once we understand a little bit more about how to address the problem that we are confronted with, namely how to address this problem of increasing exponentials that are attached to unstable systems. Any questions about this discussion that we had so far? Okay, let us take a concrete example to clarify exactly what we are after. Okay, so let us take the example of a pendulum. So we have a pendulum. Okay, it's a 1 degree of freedom system. I only need one generalized coordinate. Okay, let us say the pendulum is inverted, because that's when this instability issue will bug it. Okay, there is some initial offset theta naught maybe. Okay, and I am able to apply a torque tau. Okay, what is the differential equation governing the motion of this pendulum, it will be theta double dot minus g by L theta equal to tau in the vicinity of this equilibrium point. Okay, equation. Now, suppose I were to use this as a manipulator. This bob here actually represented some sort of a manipulator which could move things about on this circular path that this bob takes. Okay, it could move an object from here to some other place, let us say, and I want this object to be moved to this new location within a certain duration of time. So this is a very simple manipulator in its own right. Okay, a vertical manipulator. I want it to be moved from here to here in a certain duration of time, and I want it to start with a certain velocity, accelerate, starting from rest, accelerate to a certain velocity, maintain that velocity and decelerate and come back to rest at the new location and release that part there. Let us say that's the kind of requirement that I have. So associated with that requirement, therefore, is this theta d, the manner in which I want my angle theta to change as function of time. Okay, so how do I get theta to follow theta d? What is the simplest way in which we can get that to happen? So as I said, one very simple way, suppose initially itself, even at t equal to 0, theta d was equal to theta naught. Okay, the initial value of angle. Then the torque I would need to apply to get theta d to change as function of time would be given by tau is equal to theta d double dot minus g by L theta d. Right? But suppose I were to very naively apply this particular torque to this particular problem. So this, if you remember, represents an unstable system, right? Let us say I apply this particular torque. What do I get? Theta double dot. So if I apply this torque on the right hand side, I get theta double dot minus g by L theta is equal to theta d double dot minus g by L theta d. So the error dynamics will obey that theta minus theta d whole double dot minus g by L times theta minus theta d is equal to 0. Okay, let me call theta minus theta d as the error theta e. Okay, I don't want to use the symbol e itself because e represents the error in state. Here theta is not just a state. Okay, it's one of the elements in the state vector. The other element is the velocity, which I have not talked about here. So I invent a new symbol for the error, theta e. Okay, so what is the dynamics of theta e? Theta e double dot minus g by L theta e is equal to 0. Okay, and you see therefore that this system, the error dynamics is also unstable. Okay, so if there is some initial error between where I want my pendulum to be located and where it is actually located, that error will only grow with time, because the solution to this differential equation has a term of the kind e to the power plus root g by L times t. So I will therefore not be able to accomplish my goal of getting theta to converge to theta d as time progresses using this particular control law. Any questions about it? Okay. So this is where on the other hand, let us say I had the pendulum pointed down in its conventional configuration. What would the error dynamics look like? It will be of the kind, I'll just write here. I'll not do the intermediate steps. It will be of the kind theta e double dot plus g by L theta e equal to 0. And it's a marginally stable system, right? So if there is some initial error, theta e naught, then that theta e naught will not disappear as function of time. It will just persist. Okay, but this is definitely better than what it was before. In the other case, when the pendulum was upright, that initial error will only build up as function of time. In this particular case, applying that torque of the kind that I just showed you will not cause the error to build up as function of time. Okay, it will just persist. It will not die down either. So we are therefore in this tragic situation where in both the situations, in both the configurations, I cannot completely get my pendulum to track the desired waveform theta d of t. In one case, I'll have always some error which may be changing, fluctuating as function of time, never dying out. In the other case, that error will keep increasing as function of time between the desired angle change as function of time and the actual angle of the pendulum. Okay, so something has to be done to address this issue. Any questions about what we have discussed so far? So there is some algebra here, but what is more important is to pay attention to the logic and the arguments that we are making here. Yeah, Subhadeep Sahu has a question.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Sir,
Good morning.
That theta E naught, that term I could not follow, sir. But
so let us say, starting from this particular location, okay, I want the end effector to be located here at time t equal to 0 and go to this particular location at time t equal to 1 second, let us say. Okay, but at time t equal to 0, I find that my pendulum is not really located here, but it is located there. Okay, so this is theta naught, the initial value of the orientation of the pendulum. This is theta d at t equal to 0, which is where I wanted the pendulum to be located, and therefore this angle, the difference between the two, is theta E naught. Clear?
yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, and what is the use of it?
Yes. Pardon me?
Sir, what is the use of it? Theta E naught.
No, I'm just pointing out that I want my system to follow theta d as function of time. And this theta E is a measure of how well I'm able to follow theta d. Do you agree with me? If theta d is 0, then what that means by definition is that by definition theta E is theta minus theta d, right? So what is the use of this? This is like a gauge which tells me how far away I am from my desired goal of, and my desired goal is to get my angle to change according to this particular waveform. Okay, theta E tells me how far away I am from that, and theta E naught tells me how far away I am from that at the initial instant of time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and as a control engineer, I desire that this guy should be made close to 0 as quickly as possible. Okay, but what we see is that in general we are stuck with a situation where we are at the mercy of the system's dynamics. If a system is stable, then great, my theta E will eventually go to 0 because I only have this is a homogeneous equation and I have some initial condition. So e to the power at will only have decreasing exponentials in it. So as function of time, theta E will go to 0. Okay, so that is great if I'm having a stable system on my hand. But even for a system as simple as a pendulum, we saw that in neither of its configurations, around neither of its equilibria, is the pendulum a stable system. In one case, it's an unstable system. In the other case, it's a marginally stable system. So I will either have the error growing as function of time, and therefore I'll be moving farther away from my desired objective of getting theta to change in this particular manner, or in the best case situation, there will be some error which will persist, which I cannot reduce as function of time. Okay, so what do I do to fix this stalemate situation? Let us take this particular example itself. Okay, the case for the pendulum, maybe the inverted pendulum, because that situation is more dramatic than the other case. Okay, this is the equation for the inverted pendulum, and we have decided that we will apply a certain torque which is given by theta d double dot minus g by L theta d. Okay, that was what we attempted to do, and we were thwarted in our attempts because the system is unstable. Okay, but suppose for a moment we had the common sense to invest in a sensor and measure this angle theta of the pendulum in real time. Okay, there's a potentiometer which I can use, let us say, to measure that angle or some such thing. Then I have real-time information about where this pendulum is situated at any particular point in time. If you notice here, the torque that I have applied does not depend on my knowledge of where the pendulum is located right now. It only depends on what I dream where it ought to be located. Theta d is what I want it to do. Okay, I have no information of what it's actually doing. Okay, so let us say I had information about what it's actually doing. In other words, I was able to measure theta. This is a very radical step. Okay, this is central to a lot of improvement that can be obtained in solving the problem that we are confronted with. Let us say we are able to measure theta. Okay, then how do we use this measurement? Here is one clever way in which it can be employed. Let us say, in addition to this torque which I have applied, I add an extra term. I add an extra amount of torque which is proportional to the error between the actual value and the desired value. Okay, let us say I do that. Maybe I will add this. I'll put a minus sign here for reasons that will become clear in a minute's time. Let us say I do this. I can do this, remember, only because I'm making a measurement. Otherwise, I cannot do this, right? I'm making a measurement in real time of where the pendulum is located. And with that measurement, I can compute it. I can generate a torque which is proportional to the error between the actual location where it ought to be located and where it is located at this instant of time. So theta e of t minus theta of t. How will the aerodynamics change if this extra component of torque is added on top of what was already present? Let us see. So if we simplify the equation,
theta minus, one question.
Pardon me?
So is it theta minus theta d of t or theta e of t?
Theta d, sorry, you are right.
Oh.
Theta d. Thank you for pointing it out. The error, theta minus theta d. Okay, or in other words, it's just minus k times theta e. Okay, so let us work out the error dynamics in this case. So theta double dot minus theta d double dot minus g by L times theta minus theta d. Okay, plus k times theta minus theta d is equal to 0. That's going to be the error dynamics. So that's going to be the equation. If I define theta e as theta minus theta d, then theta e as theta minus theta d, then theta e double dot minus g by L minus k times theta e is equal to 0. Okay, this is the equation that I get. Now, what great thing did I succeed in doing in this process? I have brought in this extra parameter. Okay, now my original system was unstable because I had a negative term being a coefficient of theta e. But now I have this constant k, which I can pick as an engineer. Suppose I pick the constant k to be a value greater than g by L. Then what will happen? Then what will happen is that this term within the bracket will be a negative term, right? If k is greater than g by L, therefore this term here will be minus of that will be a positive term. Okay, so I will have therefore theta e double dot, I can write it as plus k minus g by L times theta e equal to 0, where k minus g by L is greater than 0. Okay, now what do you guys have to say about the stability characteristics of this particular equation, this particular error dynamics? In the original case, I had the my system be on either side of the origin along the real axis, right? In the first case, this was at minus plus square root of g by L, and the other one was at minus square root of g by L. And this is what made my original pendulum an unstable system. But if I choose k to be greater than g by L, what will happen? Then my poles will be on the imaginary axis. Okay, so it will be square root of k minus g by L I times square root of k minus g by L. This is minus I times square root of k minus g by L. Okay. Now this is a huge improvement, right? Because I was initially stuck with an unstable system on my hands, and I have now modified that unstable system to a marginally stable system. So while in the first case my error was increasing as function of time, in this case my error will at least not increase as function of time. And if that initial error was small, theta E naught was small, then it is going to remain small throughout the entire course of the journey of my end effector from point 1 to point 2, from the initial position to final position. Okay. So you see therefore that I could change the dynamics of my system if I had this measurement of theta D available to me. Okay. Now I'm encouraged, I'm pumped up. Okay. I want to do more than just this. I don't want to stop with making the system just marginally stable. Now I want to ask a bolder question. Can I make it fully stable? And can I engineer the extent by which it is stable? Okay. Let us try to see how that is possible. So we have this as the expression if I am able to measure theta alone. But suppose in addition to measuring the angle, I am also able to measure the rate of change of angle as function of time, theta dot. I have some sort of a tachometer there with which I can measure theta dot. Okay, some encoder which gives me theta dot as well. Okay, then what I can do is let me go back to that equation. Theta double dot minus g by L theta is equal to tau. That's the equation of my inverted pendulum, and in the neighborhood of its equilibrium point. And I chose tau to be equal to theta d double dot minus g by L theta d, but failed in this process with this selection to get my states to follow my desired value theta d. But adding this extra term minus k plus k times theta minus theta d made my system a marginally stable system. Suppose in addition to theta, I can measure theta dot also. So let us say I call this k1 and k2 theta dot, and I shall add another extra term to the torque which is proportional to the error between the actual angular velocity and the desired angular velocity at that instant of time. Let us say I add that extra term to my torque as well. I compute this torque and I apply it to my physical system. I apply it to my pendulum. What do I get? So I would have theta double dot plus or minus g by L theta is equal to theta d double dot minus g by L theta d minus or plus. I think I keep getting confused. Plus k1 times theta minus theta d plus k2 times theta minus theta dot minus theta d dot. Okay. Well, for reasons that will become clear later, instead of making these signs plus, I will make these signs minus. Okay. For reasons that will become clear in a moment. So I will then have the error dynamics to be theta minus theta d double dot plus k2 times theta minus theta d dot, then plus k1 minus g by L times theta minus theta d is equal to 0. Or in other words, theta E double dot plus k2 times theta E dot plus k1 minus g by L times theta minus theta d is equal to 0. Or sorry, this is theta E is equal to 0. Okay. Now, what do you have to say now about the stability characteristics of this particular differential equation? Does this remind you of a mass damper spring differential equation governing a mass spring damper connected together? And is a mass spring damper a stable system or an unstable system? It's a stable system, right? Because if I have, let us say, a mass suspended by a spring and a damper, it obeys an equation similar to this. the mass from a certain initial position, how will it behave? Because of the presence of the damper, it will, and the spring, it will oscillate, but the oscillations will die down, and the mass will finally, the position of that mass will finally come to 0, right? So I can make the dynamics of my system stable by applying this kind of a control effort, or this kind. Where is this effort? This is the kind of torque that I am applying. Okay, I can stabilize my system. My initial pendulum was unstable. I can actually make it stable. Okay, so this very clever and revolutionary technique of changing the dynamics of a system so that it becomes stable, and then subsequently exploiting the stable nature of the system to get it to do my bidding, this is called as state feedback. Okay, any questions about this? So I have now given this. So if I choose therefore K1 to be greater than G by L and K2 to be greater than 0, then I have positive damping and I have a positive spring, and this represents an equation which will also be obeyed by a mass spring damper system, and we know that such a system is stable, right? So that is the advantage of using state feedback. I have measured the states theta dot as well as theta. Theta is the first element of my state vector. Theta dot is the second element of my state vector. I have measured both of them and I've used them to stabilize my overall system. Okay. Subhadip Sahu has a question.
Yes, sir. Sir, how these torques means due to the error of the states are imparted to the system?
Well, I may have a motor at the, I may have some way to apply torque at the hinge. Okay, it could be a motor, it could be a hydraulic arm or some such thing. So the mechanism by which I apply that torque is something that we are not looking at here. Okay, suffice it to know that there is a mechanism whereby a torque can be applied, a control input can be applied to influence the orientation of my pendulum. There are several different ways in which that can be done.
And sir, simultaneously it is measuring the error, right? Means at every
Yes.
time t, it's measuring the difference between theta and theta d.
Yes.
Okay.
So how do I measure this error? I can measure theta. So these days we have computers, right? So we can measure theta. We can acquire it by using a data acquisition system, and we can have a real-time controller compute that error in real time. So I know at this instant where I want my pendulum to be situated. That is by theta d of t, and I know where it is situated now because I have just now acquired that information from my encoder or from some other angle measurement system. Okay, so I can therefore within a computer calculate this error, and then I can generate. I can use the output of that computer to generate a torque. I can therefore generate a certain voltage to my motor if that's what I'm using to control this, to apply torque on my pendulum. I can use it to generate a torque which is proportional to that error. Okay, that's how I implement this in practice. Okay, so I have shown for a very special case here, that of a pendulum, how you can alter its dynamics by using state feedback. And let us make this a little bit more general. Okay, so we have the original system to be of the kind x dot is equal to a general linear system to the kind x dot is equal to ax plus bu. Rajpal Singh has a question.
So in this case, we have included the terms with K1 and K2, which would be somewhat akin to proportional and derivative control terms. So in this situation,
Absolutely.
how do we envision the integral control term? I'm unable to get it. How will we include an integral
But in this
term?
particular case, it is possible to include an integral control term, but it is not necessary in this particular case. Okay,
Yes,
for the kind of plant that we are trying to control here, an integral term is not necessary because this plant already has an integrator with it. And why it has an integrator, I think, is something that is a little. We'll discuss that sometime later. I mean, this notion of an integrator is a very frequency domain concept. Okay, so we will talk about it when we talk about transfer functions and so on. At the moment, just recognize the fact that given the type of the system, this is what is known as a type 1 system, which already has an integrator built into it. It is possible for the error to go to 0 without you actively bringing in an integral term as part of your controller structure. Okay.
Okay, sir, but I was
So-
asking more akin to how can we envision it physically, like we envision the proportional controller in terms of spring, and we envision the derivative controller more in terms of damper.
Physically, how do you envision?
Yes,
I
in
don't
this
have a good
circuit.
answer to that question. Physically, then this model will break down. Okay, then this system will no longer be a second order system. Firstly, if I bring in the integral term, this will be a third order system. So maybe I don't know if the third order system can be represented or visualized physically in terms of maybe another damper or some such thing, but I don't have a good answer to your question right now. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Physically, how to imagine it? Now I get your question. There is firstly, you cannot imagine it using the same model, because if you have an integral term, then that will make this a third order system, not a second order system. So this model is not valid anymore. Now, can you imagine a physical third order system with the same differential equation as this one? At the moment, I'm not able to do it.
Okay, sir.
So now let us come back to this. Let us say we have no wish to. We saw that the error dynamics is I mean, since we are focused on the error dynamics, let us not for the moment worry about XD, the desired way in which my states have to change. Let us for the moment set that equal to 0, so that we can focus only on the error dynamics. Okay, so the way we go about doing it, so in this case we applied a control effort U as minus K1 times E minus K2 times E dot, right? That's what we applied, and that's precisely the kind of control effort that we would apply even here. So if we were only looking getting the system to settle down to its equilibrium value, then X is some displacement from its equilibrium, and therefore this itself will be the error. Okay, so E dot will be of the kind A times E plus B times U, and if I apply U to be of the kind minus K times X or minus K times E, where now K is a row vector, okay, comprising K1 and K2, or lot many more terms depending on the dimension of that of this error vector. Okay, if I do that, then I would have E dot to be equal to A E minus B K E. Okay, or in other words, it will be of the kind A minus B K times E. So instead of the dynamics of the error being equal to A dot, E dot is equal to A times E, now the dynamics becomes equal to A dot, E dot is equal to A minus B K times E. Now, by choosing the elements of K judiciously, I can make sure that the eigenvalues of this new matrix A minus Bk are situated wherever I want them to be situated. So this act of choosing the gains K such that the eigenvalues of A minus Bk are some specified values, lambda 1 naught, lambda 2 naught, etc., which are so judiciously chosen that my closed loop, my system is going to be stable. Not just going to be stable, the extent of stability is also decided, right? Because these terms will tell me how fast the solutions decay to 0, and that is also decided by me ahead of time. So I choose such gains K that my closed loop, the poles of my overall system exactly are these specific ones. Okay, so that act of choosing the gains K is what is known as pole placement. Okay, so by placing the poles, you're able to get the desired extent of stability for your system, and central to this is our ability to perform state feedback, or in other words, measure the states, the velocity and the position, or the joint velocities and the joint positions if you have a general n-link serial manipulator, and generate torques that are some linear combinations of these quantities. Okay, we will explore this in greater detail in the next class. And when is it possible? When is it not possible? What if the full state is not measured? All of that we will take a look at in the next class. Okay, so Rushikesh Shamrao has a question.
Sir, in while defining u equals to minus k1 e minus k2 e dot, and you written the below u equals to minus k times c.
I think I have abused the notation here. I have abused the notation here. I'm sorry. What I had in my mind was okay. How do we do this now? This e is not the same as that. This is a scalar e. Okay, and this is a scalar e dot. Whereas this e here is a 2 by 1 vector. Okay, so I have abused notation here. I don't know how to immediately correct it. Maybe I'll call this E1 and E1 dot or something for the moment. Okay, I will fix these notation problems in the next class. Maybe I will redefine these differently so that these notation problems don't exist. But this is a 1 by 1 vector, for especially for this particular case. Whereas this is a scalar and this is a 2 by 1 vector. Okay, so there's no inconsistency if notations are taken care properly.
Okay.
Any other question? Okay, so if there are no further questions, we will stop at this point. And as I said, I will send the notes. I will send the answer sheets hopefully tomorrow. And I will also create this link for you to upload your homework 5 tomorrow. I have not yet sent you homework 6. I will do that soon. Hopefully tomorrow itself, you will get that as well. Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.